Hey everyone, in order to start out this presentation today, we're gonna start out with a little commercial about more engineering, and then I'll get right into the presentation.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Buckles, President of More Engineering. I'd like to welcome you today to our Minnesota Association of Watershed Districts virtual conference session. Since 1960, More Engineering has been dedicated to improving lives by building strong communities. We have completed thousands of civil and environmental engineering projects throughout Minnesota and North Dakota, advancing the region's water, municipal, and transportation infrastructure, and greatly improving the quality of life in dozens of cities and communities. Over the next hour, you will learn about us and how we engage in watershed, water quality, and water quantity projects. Following this afternoon's sessions, we hope you'll join us at the Sip and Share networking event. We look forward to catching up. Thank you and enjoy the session. Today, More Engineering is a 100% employee-owned ESOP company with several offices in Minnesota and North Dakota. Our relationships extend to more than 100 communities throughout the region, and many of our clients have been with us for decades.
Our environmental team has extensive experience to serve the diverse needs of our clients, including watershed districts, local government, and private entities. We provide comprehensive engineering and project implementation, including planning, funding, strategy assistance, design, environmental review, permitting, and construction management. Our team enjoys what we do, working with our clients to identify needs, finding good solutions, and bringing a project to successful fruition. It's what we pride ourselves on, and it shows.
More Engineering is a leader in watershed management, having been a key player in developing, building, and managing some of the region's most impactful and challenging water projects, including multiple diversion projects such as the Fargo-Moorhead Diversion, several floodwater storage facilities like the proposed Redpath impoundment in west central Minnesota, multiple ring levees for urban communities such as the city of Ada, and countless rural drainage systems designed to meet modern agricultural needs and water quality improvement goals. We have a thorough understanding of the regulatory process and a proven track record assisting city, county, and water management organizations. We are proud that our work in water resources management over the past half century has contributed greatly to the growth and sustainability of our region.
Our priority is helping you navigate through the project process as easily as possible. We devise quality and sustainable solutions to alleviate client challenges. Our comprehensive approach provides a whole team of people needed to plan, develop a funding strategy, acquire permits, as well as survey, map, model, design, and implement your project. We continue working with our clients over the long term through monitoring and maintenance of their projects. We are proud of our remarkable track record for assisting our clients secure funding for implementation of their projects. We know where and when to look for funding. We can arrange special assessment schedules and are experts at navigating through the infinite layers of government paperwork. Our expansive portfolio of developing, building, and managing water resource projects in the upper Midwest is proof that the past 60 years working with local, state, and federal governments has been successful.
Gathering data and completing a desktop analysis are relatively easy steps to community capital improvement planning. Gathering input from the public and setting tentative community goals are all a part of the larger process to complete an effective plan. Building a trusting partnership of stakeholders is the key to any successful planning and implementation concept.
Our team has the experience and expertise to develop a funding strategy that will get your project to the finish line. We understand how to make the connections between your project goals and the priorities of the funding sources available. Our clients trust us to make smart design decisions that lead to successful funding requests and finished projects.
We have extensive experience with the regulatory process for a variety of projects across the Midwest that has allowed us to engage with numerous state and federal agencies and their regulatory staff. We understand the complexities of the environmental process and partner with our clients to gain the necessary approvals for successful and sustainable projects. The relationships and understanding our team has collectively built with agency staff brings value to our clients and their projects. A well thought out regulatory strategy is crucial to each unique project and necessary for successful project implementation.
Many environmental projects start with a foundation of fieldwork. By engaging our environmental team early in the project planning stages, we can help determine what field surveys may be needed. Information gathered during field surveys is essential to project design, applying for permits, and obtaining agency approvals. Identifying survey needs early keeps a project on time and budget.
Through the development of a project, thoroughly documenting the site conditions is important. From the existing conditions to the finished product, having an accurate understanding of the site helps to ensure nothing is lost in communication between the owner, the stakeholders, the contractor, and the designer. In the past, this site documentation was typically done by a combination of traditional survey, frequent site visits, and photographs. However, within the last few years, the improvements to drone and photogrammetry technology have allowed us to create a virtual 2-scale replica of the site. This form of site documentation provides a much more detailed depiction and can be complete at a fraction of the cost.
Visual aids matched with instinctive analysis can help you understand your data, whereas updated extensions of mapping programs and well-equipped technical staff give you the edge to delineate wetlands, model your watershed, or locate new and upcoming projects. GIS displays data, helps us to think differently, and connect solutions to problems visually.
Moving a project from an idea to construction often requires input from many stakeholders. Whether it be landowners, permitting agencies, or funding partners, it is very important to accurately share the ideas or elements of a project. Doing so allows them to fully understand it and provide their input. I find the most efficient way to explain a project is to show what it will actually look like in a 3-dimensional view.
We advise on all elements of a project, plan holistically, and help create balance for our clients in the water sector. Our professional engineers hold themselves to the highest standards for ethics and quality assurance. Moore has highly skilled and experienced individuals specializing in water resources to help you with your water quality, drainage, or flood risk reduction project.
Okay, that's a little bit about Moore Engineering in our company. Thanks for listening to that. Can everybody see my screen just fine?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, well, my name is Tara Ostendorf. So I'm having some technical difficulties. All right. Sorry about that. My name is Tara Ostendorf, and I'm going to talk with you a little bit about what we're doing for plan implementation as plan coordinator for the North Fork Watershed District, and then also working with Hoy de Sumastinka. So some of the work that we're currently focusing on is working with these planning partners on implementation of their comprehensive water management plans that are developed under the One Watershed One Plan program. So with the North Fork Kroger Watershed District, which North Fork Kroger Watershed, which you can see there highlighted on the map, we are
working as the contracted plan coordinator to help coordinate the efforts of the group as they implement their plan. And then we also provide additional services as needed when they come up. With the BWSR Watershed Planning Group, we are Moore Engineering as the district engineer for the BWSR Watershed District. And on behalf of them, on behalf of the Watershed District, we sit on the steering committee as a member and offer advice and participate in the process that way. So these different roles kind of offer us a unique perspective on plan implementation, and we've been able to provide input on a variety of tools that are helpful in plan implementation, and that's what I'm going to focus on today. So currently, about half of the state's planning areas have completed their plan, while the other half of the state is actively planning or has yet to start planning. Regardless of the stage that your watershed is currently in, there are steps in the planning implementation process that can be simplified with a well thought out plan for implementation and tools that can help make the implementation a lot easier. Those areas, if you've already got approved plans and have been actively implementing those plans, you may have recognized some of the benefits of creating additional tools and strategies to coordinate all of the work that your group is trying to accomplish within your plan. And then those areas that are still actively planning or have yet to start planning can benefit about thinking how they're going to actually use their plan, how it could be formatted so that it's easier to use on a daily basis, how you're going to be able to communicate your efforts moving forward, how you're going to coordinate it with each other, and how to communicate that with different audiences. Thinking about this, how you're going to actually use the plan as an active tool for getting work completed rather than a static document is going to make implementation significantly more efficient as you go forward and also a lot less frustrating. So this presentation is really focused on sparking some ideas of how to make these plans work for your planning group. So with our work on the North Fork Crow River watershed area, we assist the partners primarily in coordinating all of their activities. So coordination is really essentially herding the cats. So depending on how your planning group sets up its operating procedures after you've gotten the plan approved, the level of effort for coordinating activities is going to vary depending on what your group is trying to accomplish. So the North Fork group is very large. There are a minimum of 14 different entities involved, some that are more active than others. There are 6 counties and 6 soil and water conservation district boards. There are 2 different watershed districts themselves, the North Fork Crow River Watershed District and the Middle Fork Crow River Watershed District, that are all encompassed in this larger North Fork planning region. So to coordinate the activities across this widespread geography required dedicated staff. By hiring a consultant, Moore Engineering, they're able to keep their overhead costs down and still benefit from a team of people with a lot of different expertise working for them that can assist them with whatever ideas they come up with for implementation, whatever ideas they need help with. So for work plans, again, depending on how your plan is written, you may need multiple types of work plans to keep your group moving forward. So annual work plans are kind of laying that foundation to keep the plan implementation moving along smoothly from year to year. And then as we all know, can't get any work done without money. And so grant work plans are requirements for these agreements, and they require their own level of detail in whatever types of contract agreements that you have signed to get those monies. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on. So project development. So there's different strategies for project development that are going to depend on how targeted your plan is. So you may have an approved plan that was written a little more vague, and you're going to require additional work to define how your group undertakes project development. So a more targeted plan can lay out a clear path for specific projects that may be a little bit easier to work with. So we're going to talk about a few tools that we've assisted on to make project development a little bit easier in these 2 watershed districts or in these 2 watershed areas. And then last, tracking and reporting. There's always going to be some tracking and reporting required in some form, whether you're trying to track activities as a group for a Bowser E-Link report, or you're trying to track overall progress toward plan goals to meet Bowser guidance. Developing an efficient tracking tool or strategy is going to be important. And you're going to want to know what you want to track on the front end before you start doing a lot of work and have to go back. So again, we're going to go over some of these tools and strategies that we've developed with our clients to accomplish these steps in the process. So plan administration, the plan content requirements from Bowser at minimum require there to be language described that describes the method that you're going to use to go from planning group into implementation group. So your plan can have a really detailed schedule of how you are going to do that, exactly how you're going to coordinate yourselves and manage that activity, or it could be pretty vague and something you're going to have to work on developing once the plan's been approved. So some strategies for coordinating the group efforts. So for those of you that have approved plans, you'll have some strategy within your plan that details how your group intends to carry work forward. This is a content requirement to be included. And then some plans, like I said, have more detail and some have a lot less detail. For those of you that are just still in the planning process or beginning the planning process, I'd highly encourage you to think about what's going to make the most sense for your group very early on in the process. Questions to ask yourself might be, will you have a dedicated committee of staff once you are done planning? How involved are your respective boards going to want to be? Will they require a dedicated committee themselves? How often do you plan on meeting? And then if you're going to meet, who's going to be the one to set up those meetings? Are you going to appoint one of the members of your planning group? Or are you going to hire somebody to help do that? Does the group have existing capacity to do this kind of work? Or is it going to require some additional services outside of your existing staff? So when you're developing your plan, it's just a really good idea to know, or at least have a general idea of how you want to operate post-plan before you even get too far. This is going to help you determine the structure of your plan and what gets included as priority actions to undertake. And it can even inform the format of how information is presented within your plan as far as maps, tables, graphs, that kind of stuff. Anything that's going to be easy to use once you are actually trying to work together and implement your plan and spend money. So just some of the activities that we're responsible for when we're doing plan coordination for the North Fork can really range. So there are a variety of items that somebody's going to have to coordinate once you decide how you're going to operate. As the plan coordinator for the North Fork, we serve as the point of contact, working really closely with the fiscal host, who in this case happens to be Wright County, SWCD. And we're responsible for managing how information is shared with the group and the representative board members. And so that's kind of a constant day-to-day bookkeeping of materials, presentations, meeting minutes, all that information. And somebody has to update and maintain how that information is being shared. On a monthly basis, meetings have been scheduled. So as the plan coordinator, we help develop all the content and materials for those meetings on behalf of the group. And then if you have a plan that is a little bit different than the North Fork's plan, you might not choose to have monthly meetings. You might meet quarterly or twice a year, or even just once a year. But eventually somebody's going to have to be responsible for planning those meetings, coordinating all the materials that go into it, as well as any follow-up items that come out of those meetings. So somebody's going to have to do it at some point. Annually, we help the North Fork Watershed to do some of the items that are going to take a little bit of forethought. So if we're going to discuss funding requests, there has to be somebody out there helping to coordinate that effort, keeping track of schedules, keeping track of deadlines, making sure that there's enough lead time to actually put funding requests together, whether that's watershed-based implementation funds or if it's another grant agreement or maybe a federal program that you want to go after. Reporting requirements. It's easier to know what you need to track going forward than to try to backtrack and go and find that information later. So one of the things that we do is to make sure that everything is, all the information is being gathered from the group related to any kind of reporting requirements that we're going to have to do later on, such as e-link reporting for the watershed-based implementation grants. In addition, the two different watershed districts that we have, as well as working in the Boyd Sioux Watershed District, there are ongoing capital improvement projects that are happening. And so making sure that those discussions are had within the whole group makes sure that everybody has the same information and can conduct themselves so that there's not double work, or that they're working together as best they can. In terms of long range, Bowser does state in their plan guidance that there should be a 5-year plan review. And so one of the things that we've been doing is to make sure that any activities that the group comes up with that say this should be maybe a plan update or maybe a plan amendment at some point, we keep track of all that information for them. We make sure that it gets brought to subcommittees or other committees as needed to make sure that those decisions keep moving forward. So some of the tools, tips, and tricks that we have for doing all of this work are displayed here. So the most important tool that we can utilize is a shared network of some sort. So this allows all the partners to have equal access to real-time information, presentation materials, meetings, agendas, etc. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a minute. Another key strategy that we've been implementing is to have a schedule of recurring meetings. So it's a standing meeting invite, and we make sure that if there's nothing to talk about, that the meetings get canceled and nobody's wasting their time. But more often than not, those agendas fill up pretty quick, and we end up maxing out the time allotted anyway. As plan coordinator, we keep a topic list, all of the items that need to be discussed, and we schedule those out in this monthly meeting schedule for probably about a year, sometimes longer, so that we can make sure that deadlines are kept and that everyone is working forward towards common goals that we've all decided we wanted to work on. So as far as shared networks, depending on the size of your group, you can do different things. Google Drive is one tool that can be utilized pretty easily across both USDA accounts and whatever you may have set up for your watershed district networks to share information. Another tool could be SharePoint, which allows you to just have shared information over Microsoft Office 365 accounts. So the kinds of documents that are shared, it really helps to organize files. Both of these different drives can integrate with the Microsoft suite, so Microsoft Office, Word documents, Excel documents. So your normal tools that you would use on a daily basis are integrated into these kinds of tools. So it makes it easy to develop things from. The other thing that's nice about having a shared network is you can collaborate on the same types of documents. So as we're still all sitting in our offices somewhere, it's nice to be able to collaborate without having to send 25 versions of the same document back and forth. With the shared networks, you can oftentimes work on the same document in real time together so that you're not missing anything. And then also both Google Drive, SharePoint, they both have options for setting meetings so that everybody has the same calendars and nobody gets missed. So as an example, for the Boyd Sioux Mustinka River watershed, one of the things that we were able to do for them was to host a SharePoint site that just is basically a document center for sharing information. And then we can develop integrated tools from this as needed for the group. So one of the things that we can do is create basically a file network sharing or file system sharing, so that everybody has access to the same information. And you can either take that information, you can download it to your computer, you can use it on your own websites, however you want to use it. So just for an example, in this particular website or SharePoint site, we have the plan, we have all the maps. We're able to share all of the shape files and any other information that was developed through the plan right on SharePoint here, so that anybody can have access to that. Committees and agendas, any of the materials that are developed and shared with the group during meetings are all housed here. So it's easy to go back and find the information that you were looking for without having to constantly contact somebody and ask for the latest agenda minutes or anything like that. So it's a useful tool. This particular site also allows us to schedule recurring meetings on one calendar, and those items can then be downloaded to your personal calendars if you want. This allows you to just have one calendar to update for the whole planning process. Anybody can go in there anytime and add additional activities if they need to meet outside for something else, if they have a subcommittee, anything like that. These tools are really helpful because you can integrate it with your Outlook systems really easily, and it just serves as one thing to update instead of many calendars to update. So having the schedule of recurring meetings is really nice. One of the things that we are able to do, because we're using these shared networks, is to have agendas that have the Zoom links right on there as we're still meeting, mostly over Zoom. I don't really know that that's going to change just because of the large geography of this watershed. Not everybody doesn't have to drive an hour plus just to attend a meeting. So we include everything in there. This is standing Zoom meeting link, so everybody can get in all the time. We also attach any of the meeting materials that we want people to review right in the agenda with hyperlinks back into our shared network, so you can easily find everything. So these agendas are kind of standing tools that we use, and we just update them for each meeting and update the links as needed. One of the other things, so when we're trying to figure out what to meet about each month or each quarter or whenever you're going to meet, having a topic list in one spot that everybody can add to has been really helpful. So this is kind of a running list of topics that need to be completed. And as the coordinator at the North Fork River, we serve as a point of contact for these agendas and topic lists. So we are really the ones that are responsible for making sure that all of these ideas that happen during any of these committee meetings get listed somewhere in our track, so that we can make sure that they get addressed later on and don't just get pushed by the wayside. So we work really closely with the fiscal host to coordinate all the agendas. We provide ideas and topic suggestions for meeting goals from the plan, and then we organize all the content to be presented at these meetings. So it's really helpful if this is a shared document, so everybody can add their own ideas to the list as they come up. Some of the things that we're keeping information on is annual activities. So we want to make sure that we're going to hit all of our work plan goals, that we're going to hit all of the reporting goals that we need, and that we don't miss any opportunities for funding that the group might want to address together. Another item is these long range activities. So we want to make sure that any subcommittees that we've formed to work on things like plan amendments or plan updates are also being tracked, and those activities are kept moving forward also, so we don't lose any momentum on what we're trying to accomplish. So you can see this is just a snapshot of what OneNote can do for you. If you've never worked with OneNote before, it's a really handy tool. It's just in the Microsoft suite. So you probably have it if you have an Office 365 account or the Office suite. And you can basically just use it like a notebook. It's what it's meant to do. We just keep a simple list of everything that's happening for each committee, and running tasks and discussion items. We kind of just, at each meeting, we just write them all down, and then we figure out when they should be addressed within the year and add those to the meeting agendas. So it's a really handy way to keep things running, and everything is shared, saved on our shared network, and that way we don't ever lose it and everybody has access to it. So depending on how your plan is set up, you could have annual work plans that encompass quite a few activities. You could have a watershed-based implementation fund work plan, or you could have also multiple funding agreement work plans. So how are you going to coordinate all of these different activities that are going on within your planning area? Hopefully you've got a good implementation plan that lays it all out for you. If you don't, you're going to need a system. So the communication, the communication is really that annual work plans are going to feed, grant agreement work plans. They're going to, and vice versa. And you can see that here in this document. So basically, as you're going through your work plans, you're using the plan to come up with your annual work that you want to accomplish, whether that's grant funded work, whether that's stuff you're already doing, programs you're ongoing. That's going to help you put together your biannual work plan for watershed-based implementation funds and any other competitive grant apps that you want. So having this process of making sure that you're continually moving forward with your plan is going to help you make the most out of funding opportunities. So an example, the BWSR planning region or planning area put together with Houston Engineering a really good plan, in my opinion, that has tables that are well thought out to be useful as far as putting work plans together. So for example, in the BWSR planning area, the Watershed District, the BWSR Watershed District that we're working with, was very concerned to make sure that their capital improvement plan was well represented. They've spent a lot of time on it. It's their main focus of work, and they wanted to make sure that it was well represented in the plan so that it would still meet the needs for future funding requests. So in order to do that, we were able to work in our position on the steering committee to make sure that there was good incorporation of that. And you see on your screen now a graphic from the plan that shows the percentages of how the funding is kind of broke down within these planning areas for implementation dollars. So there's specific funds set aside just for the capital improvement projects of the BWSR Watershed District. And you can see those represented there on that map. So this is a slide from the plan that also shows just a simple way that the tables incorporated these concerns of the watershed district. So making sure that their capital improvement projects showed up, that they had strong plan connection for any future funding requests. And we worked on the steering committee to make sure that those were incorporated. So you can see there are specific projects laid out. Maybe your watershed district doesn't necessarily have a large capital improvement projects list, but if you do, you should make sure that they're incorporated well within the plan. It shows the dates that you were planning on completing those tasks, estimated reductions if possible, and then the total estimated project cost. So this is a really easy table that you can use to formulate work plans from. So in terms of project development, this is really where the plan implementation starts. So once your plan has been approved, You get through all the procedures and the policies that you need to work together, and now you have to figure out what you're actually going to work on. So you can be left with the question, what are you going to work on first? And we all know that when you start working on these approved plans, it's not like you can just drop everything that you were always doing and start an entire new process. It takes time to figure out how to coordinate activities to complement each other. So the different partners or the different entities that are within your planning areas could be county partners, watershed districts, soil and water conservation districts. Maybe there's cities or other partners that are key stakeholders, and they're all going to have a different method for their programs. They're all going to have a different method for how they can fund these projects or how they want to tackle them. So depending on the different sources of funding that you're currently working with, work plans can need to reflect how those resources are going to be utilized. So maybe you're going to be splitting pots of money, such as the watershed-based implementation funds, somewhat equally between tasks. This may require some more coordination of activities, administration to track those activities, additional expenses, and additional reporting. But maybe that's what you need to do. If you're working with a watershed district that has a robust capital improvement plan, such as the Boyd-to-Sea Watershed District, maybe the majority of your resources are going to go towards funding these large-scale projects and having large impacts. This may make plan implementation easier with a lot less activities and less administration, but it may require a lot of buy-in from the other partners in the group. Perhaps your watershed district and planning partners need more capacity to do work, or they need time to develop those projects. So you may end up sharing resources between each other to accomplish those types of activities. So if I use the Boyd-to-Sea watershed planning area as an example, we can see the potential for utilizing some additional strategies and tools for project development as they move along. So with the Boyd-to-Sea's list of capital improvement projects incorporated into the planning region, PTM map also provided targeted BMPs to meet reduction goals. So in this map on the left, you can see the targeted practices and capital improvement projects that are listed in this planning region within the plan. And on the right, you can see a well-done table that shows all of the priority resources that they're going to target within this planning region and link it back to the measurable goals in the plan. So these were tables that are for each planning region that are well done. However, if you are a SWCD working on projects, you might not know exactly how to go about targeting those BMPs that are listed here. So if you can see in that map a little bit closer up, all those capital improvement projects of the Boyd-to-Sea are listed and shown on the plan. And then the targeted BMPs are still coming out of PTM app as individual practices. And so they're kind of scattered and highlighted everywhere. So you're trying to work together as a soil and water conservation district, as well as the watershed district, to figure out the best way to utilize your resources, AKA your funds, to make the biggest impact. So as a strategy in the work plan for the first round of watershed-based implementation funds, it was decided by the group that they're going to spend a portion of those funds on specific capital improvement projects that the district was already actively implementing. Then the SWCDs would focus their project development efforts towards the targeted BMPs that are listed there that would complement those ongoing BMP or those ongoing capital improvement projects. So that way they were working together, using their own respective programs, but working in a targeted fashion. So this strategy is going to capitalize on engaged landowners that are already being tapped for these capital improvement projects. They're going to target water quality practices within the upland areas of these large projects. And it's going to increase opportunities to potentially share services to get that work accomplished. A challenge for the SWCD was coming up with a system for evaluating all of these small targeted BMPs, as well as how they're going to do outreach to these landowners. So there's a considerable amount of information and is created in data that goes into these maps and models. So however, unlocking that information can be a challenge for offices that have limited staff capacity or staff that with limited technical skills. And so even the best laid plans here, these maps are great. They incorporate a lot of information. They show you where you might need to work. There's still a little bit of a challenge there in actually being able to use that document or use this map to do the day-to-day work of contacting those landowners, evaluating those practices. And so we were able to take just the information that was already created through the planning process. We obviously do not want to recreate or duplicate any efforts that were already done. And so we're just coming up with some simple applicable tools for those staff to use to increase their effectiveness. So one of the things they're able to do is just take those maps, put them into some online interactive maps that the staff have access to, and it simplifies the data. So instead of getting the World Wide Web of PTM app information, which can be somewhat overwhelming, just into that information out of those data sources that the Soil and Water Conservation District or the Watershed District is actually interested in using on a day-to-day basis. So I can show you a demo of how that works. So this is specifically designed. I'm hoping you can show my screen or see my screen when I show this. So this is a map that was specifically designed just for the Traverse SWCD working with within the Boydus planning area to help them identify landowners for these targeted BMPs, as well as just to see if these BMPs were worth pursuing for projects. And so we basically just took layers that were already in the data provided through the planning process, and then made simplified tools that were consistent with what they needed to actually do their day-to-day job. So all of the practices that are listed on those targeted maps are now loaded up here onto a map that has also their parcel information for landowners that they can go in and look around, as well as updated aerials so that they can evaluate just from their desktop, just do a first cursory glance. Is it something they want to pursue or something that they're going to check off as a no-go? It also includes information that can help them, some of the tech memos related to PTM apps, so they can determine if it's saying it's a filtration practice, well, what does that potentially mean? And so that's one tool that we were able to provide to the Soil and Water Conservation District so that they can work concurrently with the Watershed District implementing these large-scale projects. So now that the partners are able to easily view the map data and reference landowner information, we were able to also come up with some additional effective tools for them to analyze practice viability and come up with these targeted lists of areas to pursue. So the PDF on the left simply shows all these targeted BMPs as a PDF, which are listed in the plan along with the parcel information. So staff wanted to be able to just print something off, be able to look at it on their desk and start evaluating whether or not practices were worth pursuing or not. So even though PTM app is a very powerful tool and can give you a lot of information, what it really came down to was being able to use what was developed in their plan to actually do the work. So we listened to what they were needing and were able to provide this to them. In addition to that, we were able to provide an Excel document from the same data sets, which basically just helps them determine if they're looking at this BMP here, they can go and search it in the Excel document, find the landowner, do whatever they need to do. And we were able to also add some columns in there so that they could do a cursory go or no go on site visits, so they could start analyzing those BMPs for future projects. So in addition, and this is an example from the North Fork that was having the same issue. It was having the same issue of limiting the effective implementation of the plan. So the usability of these tables and data. So this is the tables and data for implementation that are right out of the North Fork plan. This is what the group is trying to use to decide which practices to target for future project development. The table on the right lists the different BMP unique IDs, what kind of practice they are and what the reductions potentially are. And there are top 10s and top 250 practices within each planning region for each section of the plan. So again, a lot of information, powerful information, but how do you use it on your daily day-to-day, especially if you're not a staff that has GIS skills or capacities. What we were able to do was kind of the same thing. Take all that existing information that was developed during the planning process and just apply it to a tool that was limited in information to just what they actually were looking for. So we're not creating any new data or doing overwork. We're just using what they have to create something easy to use. So if they were to click into there, they would see each of their top 250 practices, which are the most cost-effective best practices within each planning region, and they would have some information. On this table, we actually did leave a lot of the PTM map information as it's in its raw form spit out from PTM map, because the group was actually using that for some items in a tool that I'll talk about later. So reporting and tracking, grant tracking and reporting is never going to go away. So with large groups, especially if you're utilizing the watershed-based implementation funds, it can get even a little more complicated. So sharing information with partners, as well as minimizing the effort it requires to keep track of project expenses, isn't something that was determined in the planning process. So it had to be developed after the plan approval for both the Boydesue-Mustinka planning areas and the North Fork planning areas. It just wasn't something that they thought about during that process. So in addition to required grant tracking, BWSR has also recently released guidance on what would be expected for tracking and reporting plan progress. So there's extra work to be done. And I'm just going to show you an example of a tool that we developed for the North Fork to efficiently track some multiple items. So in this, the Watershed had previously developed a ranking criteria as a method to select practices for funding based on PTM map data for each practice. Under the contract agreement with us, we were asked to revise that ranking tool spreadsheet, and we were able to incorporate some more plan elements into this new version, as well as some fiscal tracking in the interactive mapping tool that I just showed to assist with the process. So basically it's all tracked now on one worksheet. There's a lot of background information tied in there from the plan as far as plan priorities, priority resources, that kind of information. That's all carried up into a project ranking sheet that actually scores and ranks practices as they are brought forward to the group. The thought was that if you had enough practices, you might need to rank them out so that everybody had equal access to the funding, or if a practice wasn't meeting the plan components, it wasn't doing a good enough job, basically, that you could have a reason to say no to funding something. So that's one tool that we were using there. So going forward, like I was alluding to there, evaluating the plan progress is a little more tricky. Now that BWSR's released their guidance on how to do this, we're going to start working on developing some strategies and tools that are going to be needed to meet that guidance without creating additional burden on tracking and reporting. So that's something that's likely going to be done in subcommittees with staff moving forward. This is something we were holding off working on until BWSR approved this guidance, which they now have. So we're going to start on that here in the next couple of months. So with that, keys to success, I think, with a watershed plan, if you're going to take anything away from this presentation today, is making sure that you're writing a plan that you can actually use. Make sure that your plan's not so vague that you can't figure out what to do with it, and that you're actually looking at that end game of how are you going to actually use this thing as a tool to write work plans, a tool to write grants from, a tool to do your actual work from, and make sure that that is correctly represented in whatever format, charts, maps that you're actually putting into this plan. It's your document. You're going to want to be able to use it. And then find ways to make your plan document interactive and useful. And I know that these are all static documents now, but they might not have to be. There may be elements in there that can be incorporated into some more interactive elements, something that's easier to use. Whoa. So that's kind of where all that I have. And I hope you were able to take something away from that. If there's any questions.
Tara, I don't see any questions in the chat, but if you want to unmute yourself, you're welcome to ask questions right now. Otherwise, you can type it in the chat.
All right, well, if there aren't any other questions, feel free to stop by and talk to me at the Sip and Share event at 4 o'clock here. I'll be sitting in our virtual couch, I guess.
Thank you so much, Tara. We are going to be moving on to our next session here shortly. It'll start at 3 p.m. If you plan to attend the Roseau Lake rehabilitation session with Nate Gallagher, you can stay on this Zoom link. Let me just...
Did you guys see that a question came in?
Yes, I just see it now. It's from Maury. And the question is, how much did the integration cost?
So the integration costs are really developed as a time and materials type project that we're working on. So it's kind of difficult because you don't know exactly what you're going to need until you start working with your plan, and then these ideas are developed. And so we're working under a contract with the right SWCD now. We strive to make sure that it's a good fit for the group. So we didn't want to go over any kind of plan administration costs that they had outlined. But if there are additional tools that they come up with that they want to do, if it falls outside the scope, we just do it as time and materials and help them figure out how to get what they need out of their plan. So sorry, I don't have a great answer for that one.
Okay, I think we should be all set then.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you all for attending. Like I said, the next session will start at 3 p.m. Thank you so much, Tara.